Welcome back to How Griffith Knives Are Made. This is going to be the beginning of part 3. At the end of part 2, we did go over normalizing, but seeing as part 3 is just going to be heat treat, it'll probably be a pretty short video. But there are a lot of guys out there that look for information on heat treat because there are so many resources out there. And I don't claim to be an authority on the subject, but what I will say is that the heat treat on my knives has always been very well received. I've never had a bad review on a heat treat, and just yesterday I actually saw the first knife that I made with a chipped edge. My brother actually brought it in, and he kind of led up the story with a little bit of suspense, saying that he dropped it on a wooden table from less than a foot. And then he let me kind of look at him for about 10 seconds, and then he told me that it rolled off the table about 3 feet to the ground on concrete or so. So, you know, obviously if you drop your knife on concrete, these are tempered to about 60, 61 Rockwell. If you drop your knife on concrete, you are going to chip the edge. And then warranty comes into play. I don't cover that under warranty so far as replacement, but if you send the knife back to me, I will adjust the edge. His chip was actually in the belly, but that's neither here nor there. That can be removed. So we'll review normalizing. I guess we can actually go over heat treat prep too. I sand up to at least 120. And if it's going to be a polished finish, or sometimes even a satin finish, if it's got a lot of deep scratches in it, I'll sand up to 400 grit before I even start heat treat. So starting out normalizing, I run the temp up to 1600 Fahrenheit, and I cool and still air. And what it means by cool and still air, you don't want a whole lot of air circulating. So when I normalize, I triple normalize, by the way. I shut up the kiln and I let it run the normalizing cycle. It ramps up to 1600, and then I just cut it off. I turn the kiln off, I shut the door, and I'll come back a couple hours later, and if it's, I usually just leave it overnight on a weekend or something. And then the next day of the weekend I'll run it again, and then the next day of the weekend I'll run it again. Given this week, I kind of had kind of a Friday. I was off doing a class, so I do triple normalize. And the next step after your normalizing is complete is austenitizing. My austenitizing cycle, and a lot of guys, I don't understand. There's kind of a mystique around heat treating, kind of a secret to it for some reason. And I've actually been advised not to share this, and maybe one day I'll live to regret it. But I don't really see a whole lot of sense in trying to keep a heat treatment a secret. I mean, I've got a table right here from Lindquist Steels, which is where I get my 01 tool steel, and it's got all the information on it. It's, you know, it's not a very difficult thing. Now, it is a technical thing, but it's not difficult. And one of the best ways is to not really think about it as kind of a mysterious thing, but more of a scientific thing, because that's what's going on. It's science. It's not magic. So now we're to austenitizing, which is one of the first things that a lot of guys just don't share. My austenitizing cycle runs up to 1480 degrees Fahrenheit, and I let it soak for 30 minutes. Now the timer is set for 35 minutes soak time. And the reason for that is so that I have time to quench. I only austenitize 3 knives at a time, and unless you've got somebody helping you or you've got some kind of setup that allows you to, you can only quench 1 knife at a time. So that's why I've got a 5-minute overlay, or whatever you want to call it. I've got 5 minutes tacked on, and the reason for that is this kiln door is going to get opened. You're going to pull a knife, it gets quenched, and then you got to open it again, and then quench, and then open it again, and then quench. So that's why I only do 3 knives austenitizing at a time. After that, the heat loss can get to the point that it's going to alter your results to possibly a noticeable level. My quench tank. This is Chevron 70. Let me double check that. I'll cut this part out if I'm wrong. Yes. This is Chevron quenching oil 70, and it's designed for this purpose. I buy a 5-gallon bucket of it, and I'm still on my first gallon. This is just a 1-gallon paint can. It's a sterile paint can. It was not a used paint can. And I've taken a piece of G10 and I've epoxied it. Just literally stuck it on there with some extra epoxy that I had after doing some handle work. And that keeps me from having to actually grab it, and it makes it a lot easier to work with because this helps retain the heat. Okay, so I've got 1 gallon of Chevron 70 in this unused paint can, and I preheat to about 130 to 150. I usually start at 130. That way, after quenching, it has room to go. Now then, the order in which I quench. This may or may not be a huge deal. It's just something that I do. I quench the smallest knife first out of the 3. And then when I'm doing a batch, I organize it so that it's kind of balanced for every austenitizing batch. So I quench the smallest knives first and the largest knives last, because the largest knives are there's more mass here. So when you quench this, it's going to alter the temperature in your quench tank more than these smaller knives are. So the goal in heat treat, like I said, it's not magic, it's science. It's consistency. That's why I use a digital kiln. That's why I use a digital thermometer to control, not to control, but to monitor the temperature in my quench tank. And consistency is the key, because once you've got your numbers and once you've got your programs or your temperatures, if you don't have a programmable kiln, you just stay consistent. Once you find what works, and once you find a combination of numbers and times that give you positive results, that's what you want to stick with. If you start changing stuff without testing it and making sure that it's an improvement, then you can really mess yourself up that way. You don't want to have quality concerns. There are manufacturers out there that, you know, they do so many knives at a time, and their heat treats are optimized for mass production, that it becomes a problem. And more often than not, the steel is too hard instead of being too soft. I could be wrong about that, but that's just the way that it seems. You see a lot of chipped edges from certain manufacturers, and you end up having to send them back. They got to be reground. They'll fix them for you, but you know, quality control is an important thing, and I've yet to have a knife returned to me because of it being too hard or excessive chipping and things like that. Your knife should never chip if it's designed to be used in such a way that my knives are, including the Scandi edged ones. They're designed to be pushed through wood and batoned and all this other stuff. And if you see an issue even once where a customer is batoning a knife and the tip breaks right off the knife, then you need to look closely at your heat treat. And like I said in the previous video, if you're not confident in your heat treat, then there are companies out there that can do that for you. And as a matter of fact, I've got 2 knives in this batch that I'm heat treating for a good friend of mine, and I'm more than happy to do that for him. And maybe in the future, I'll be open to doing it for other folks too, because I'm a small shop. I'm a one-man run operation. You know, I can get knives in and out a little bit faster than some of the larger companies out there. Now, am I going to be as good as those larger companies? That's up to the guy that's doing business with me. and so far he's been happy with the results too. But just going back to consistency, even through the tempering and everything, consistency. Alright, so now we're going to get into actually starting up this next cycle for austenitizing. Now you can see that the kiln has been run. It's actually coming back down from the previous batch of 3, and I've got my next 3 knives here. So what I'm going to do, the kiln is still crazy hot as you can see. I'm going to put on my glove. These are probably about the most important protective items that you've got when you're working with the kiln. And I've got a pair of, these are just Craftsman Robo Grip pliers. Nothing fancy, just because I don't have anything fancy right now. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the big one. This is just how I do it. Place it in here edge up. Third from the left. Take the next one, second from the left, and I leave it sticking out about a ½ inch far from the previous blade. And third one, first slot on the left, sticking out another ½ inch. Now why do I stick them? Why do I stagger them like that? Because when I sling this kiln open, it becomes a slow as smooth, smooth as fast sort of deal. These pieces of steel are going to be almost 2,000 degrees, and you don't want to slip. Okay, you know, if you slip something up at the very least, you're gonna scratch up the fire brick in your kiln. This stuff is really soft. You could bend the knife. You could mar up the tip. I mean, you could do all kinds of stuff. And even worse, you could drop hot steel on your skin. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can go wrong here. And that's including oil fires. Oil fires are really common. I get an oil fire at least 1 per every 3 that I quench. And that's just normal. That's just part of the game. So what we're going to do now that we've got our blades in the kiln is we're getting ready to start up our cycle. You can see I got them in there. I'm going to set those down. Don't need the glove for now. We're going to close this puppy up. We're going to select recall. Program 4 is my austenitizing cycle. And we're going to hit run and enter. Now then it's going to click here, and there you go. You heard the click. And that's the coils in the computer, clicking the coils on and off. And this will ramp up to temp as fast as it can. I'll let them sit in there for a little while, but the preheat, you are supposed to preheat 01. Again, I've yet to have an issue with that. It seems to take a little while to get them up to temp anyway. So, and I'm not throwing them into a kiln that's already blazing hot. I mean, it's about 500 degrees. So it'll ramp up to temp. You can see it right now. And when it gets there, it'll hold for 35. I'm only going to wait for 30. And then I'm going to start quenching. And we'll come back then. Alright, so we've got 7 minutes left. So I've got about 2 minutes here to do a rundown of what's about to happen. The quench oil is preheated on this stovetop. Excuse me, on the stovetop. And when it's ready to go, right before the quench, I move it over to where it's accessible. And once this hits five minutes, I'm going to throw the glove on, and we're going to get to quenching these. There is going to be a lot of smoke. I don't know if that's going to make it real hard for y'all to see what's going on, but I'll record the whole process. You can just kind of see how it flows when I do it. I'm sure I'm not the best at it either. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off that thermometer because this is the last time we're going to use it tonight. And this is essentially the end of the austenitizing and the quenching. After this, we'll go over, you know, what I do afterwards. I kind of brush off any remaining scale that didn't get blown off in the quench, and then we'll jump into tempering. So here we go. And I like to quench until the smoke really starts to subside. Okay, that's about got it for this one. It'll subside a little bit more, and I'll leave it in there for a few more seconds. Because you need to be able to get it down to the appropriate temperature, which is somewhere around 125, 150 or so in this quench tank. So when you pull it out, you don't want to see a bunch of smoke coming off of the blade itself, which the smoke that we're seeing is coming off of the handle portion that didn't get quenched, but the blade itself is good. And I'm going to check it for straightness real quick, and then I'm going to put it over here on the rack. The rack is important because it's not a heat sink. You do not want to sit freshly quenched blades on a heat sink. That is a good way to break your knives. I've also got this oven running over here. Just a little bit of warm air wash over the knives so that they don't cool down too much outside of the heat treat process. Now, I don't know if anybody else does that, but that's the way that I do it. Because I also use this kiln to temper. So after we're done quenching these, we've got to bring that kiln down in temperature as fast as possible so that we can get our tempering started. Because you do want to get your knives tempered as soon as possible. Don't have any smoke coming off the blade. It's straight. We'll set it down. Alright. Last one. I leave the kiln door open. Stop the cycle. This one's gonna burn. There it goes. That's normal. That's okay. Now, to put out the oil fire in the quench tank itself, it's as easy as pulling the oxygen. There you go. Oil fire's gone. Do not try to stop it with water. That's not really going to do you any good. And I didn't go over this earlier, but anytime you're doing stuff like this, you really should have a fire extinguisher. My fire extinguisher is right next to the door. No smoke coming off the blade. from the oil. It's not burning the oil off of the blade. It's straight. We'll go set it down. Alright, so we got the kiln turned off. We'll go ahead and cap our quench tank. We're done with that. Now then, behind the camera, you can't really see them, I've got some fire bricks. Like fireplace bricks, not the soft stuff, but just regular fireplace bricks. And what I'm going to use those for is this stand. This stand will prevent your kiln from cooling as quickly as possible. And that's because it's ceramic. Unlike these bricks, which are also intended to hold as much heat as they can, that stand will stay very, very hot for quite a while. So you don't want to set it on anything wood or anything that's going to warp terribly. And you want to get it out of your kiln so that you can use your kiln. Now I know there are a lot of guys that use conventional ovens to do their tempering. And they get really good results with it. I've even seen guys that use toaster ovens to do their tempering. So long as you're checking your temperatures and ensuring that you're getting consistent temperatures with, say, a digital thermometer, that will probably work as well. I saw one fella that, you know, he liked to use a propane forge and a magnet and transmission fluid to heat treat his knives, and then he would temper in a toaster oven, but he did not double check the temperature in the toaster oven, and he broke about one knife for every 10 that he made. Now a lot of times he was breaking them in the quench, and I know that the traditional methods, they've worked for a very long time. A lot of guys use color. A lot of your blacksmiths will use color to determine the temperature range, and if they know what they're doing, then they're really good at it. But I prefer the more scientific approach with very precise temperature control, and that's a preference of mine because I'm not a blacksmith, and I don't know the color range. I know roughly the color ranges, but I don't know the color ranges well enough to rely on them. So this is what I do to get consistent results. What else can I go over? I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. I'm going to come over here behind the camera with it. Move this out of the way. Clear off my fire bricks. And you got to be really gentle with this. It's hot, it's ceramic, it is brittle. You grab it by the thickest portion. These pins are very fragile, but the stand itself is pretty sturdy. I just grab a hold of it and walk slowly with it because it is hot. It is crazy stupid hot. Alright, we got that out. And this this oven is still going to just wash heat over these blanks until this kiln is cool. Now the oven is not administering any kind of crazy heat right now. It's just hot air blowing, just kind of washing over. And that's to keep the blanks from cooling down to the point where they can start fracturing themselves. It's not anything over maybe 100 degrees, if that. They're all cool enough to actually touch, but they're warm to the touch. One other thing that I do after the quenching is complete is I'll pick up the blanks and I'll brush off any remaining scale. Do you have to do this? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. But I have found that you want to brush in one direction if you're not wearing a glove on this hand, because if this is hot, which this one is not, if it is hot and you brush towards yourself, you can brush scale directly onto your hand, and I have burned myself that way. And depending on how hot that blank still is, you can get a gnarly little blister doing that. So this is just something that I do before I temper. You don't want to drop these either. Because if you've done your job right, these are somewhere around 63, 65 Rockwell C. And if you drop these on the concrete, there's a really good chance that you're going to break them. And then you've just cost yourself time and money. All right, this is going to be the last part for the heat treat, and then I'm going to go to bed because it's almost 3 o'clock in the morning. So, tempering. After you've quenched all your blades, if you're going to use an oven, once they're cool enough to touch, you go ahead and pop them in the oven. I like to use the kiln because it's digitally controlled and it's very accurate. So that's my preference. And what I did is, after the stand cooled off, I put it back in here. The kiln is cooled off. It's only about 170 degrees now. And what I'll do is I don't shut it and just turn it on and walk out. When I'm getting ready to temper, because of some variables, I'll close it up and I'll watch it rise without actually turning it on yet. And by turning it on, I mean applying heat. Because sometimes there's enough heat left in there and just other things, you know, ambient temperature and whatnot. If it's a hot day and I close this thing up and it might be 200 degrees, I'll watch it shoot right up in temperature without even applying heat from the thermocouples or the coils. So I do watch that because you don't want to overshoot your tempering, your set temp by far at all, because that'll throw off your temper and you'll end up softening your knives to the point that you don't want to. So I shoot for 60-61 Rockwell on the C scale. I do not have a Rockwell tester. It is recommended that you Rockwell test your knives, but I do not Rockwell test my knives. But assuming that you do everything correctly by the tables, that's the Rockwell hardness that you should attain. And I use a triple tempering cycle, or I triple temper my blades, not to be confused with one cycle that actually does that. Should I try to actually program it to do all 3 tempering cycles in the middle of the night, it actually won't be able to do that, because after the first tempering cycle being held for 2 hours and just the ambient temperature in the shop, being what it is, it's still trying to get back down before it can get started on the next ramp. So what I end up having to do is I have 3 different cycles programmed. As you should, drop the temperature 25 degrees for every subsequent cycle that you do when you're doing multiple tempering cycles. Again, depending on the steel, I'm not sure what other steels are. 01 tool steel, 25, 50 degrees, something along those lines, depending on your sources. So my first tempering cycle, assuming I've done everything right as far as hardening the blades, first tempering cycle is 2 hours at 475 degrees Fahrenheit. And what I'll do tonight before I head into the house is I'll shut this up and I'll turn it on, and I'm going to go to bed. And the next tomorrow morning I'll come back out here and it'll probably be down to the proper temperature. I'll just open it up and check everything out, make sure it's all good to go, and then we'll start up the second cycle. which is 450, 2 hours, let it cool, and then 425, 2 hours, let it cool. Now, one thing that I have seen folks do that is not recommended by any sources that I have read is quenching when you're tempering. Now, I've seen professional bladesmiths do that, and their work is very well regarded, but it is not something that is recommended. I don't do that. One other thing that I didn't mention earlier is after your knives are quenched, these haven't been tempered yet, these are still freshly quenched blades, is testing the hardness. It can be tested with a file. Now be aware that there is some decarb, at least a few thousandths of an inch thick on these blades, so you will get some wear, but you're not going to be grinding into the metal or filing into the metal. And it just kind of glides over the steel doing that, and you may not be able to see it from there, but there's no, this file's not cutting this knife, this edge, the way that it would if this was still annealed steel. So I know that it's been hardened, and that's what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this up and make sure that the temperature doesn't shoot up too high, that it will throw off my tempering cycle, and then I will fade over into the next step. So the temperature's not really going anywhere crazy, so I'm not worried about any of that. So again, just a review on running an even heat kiln with the Ramp Master. This is a model RM3. Not sure how any other Ramp Master models might work. They're probably pretty similar, but you've already got it programmed using the development mode. You're going to hit recall, whatever program that you want to run. This happens to be program 5, and then you hit enter. It'll go back to standby, and then just reading the internal temperature on the kiln. Run, enter, and you'll hear the thermocouples come back on, or the coils come back on. There's the clicking right there, and that's it. That's it for the night. So again, it's 15 till 3 in the morning, the night after Easter. So I've spent quite a bit of shop time out here today, and it's just after the family left. So, but I've got a nice head start on this week. I don't know how many of y'all actually know me from the forum or whatnot, but I'm trying to push and get a lot of work done before this summer. I'm working with the Boy Scouts of America this summer. I'm directing a program with them, so I'm gonna be out of the knife making game for about a month and a half this summer, and I had to close my order books to do that. So I'm trying to clean off my plate, and once that's done, I will again start accepting orders if you're interested in that. But those orders won't be filled until July. So if you want to place an order with me, be aware that I'm not going to be accepting orders until I finish the next batch, and then those orders that I take will not actually be getting started until July. So I try to keep up with stuff, and I'm usually pretty good about making movement on my wait list. This winter was kind of hard because I don't actually have any heat out here in the shop, but we do what we got to do. So if you got any questions, again, leave a comment, or if you're on the forum, just go ahead and post in the thread how Griffith knives are made, and I'll be more than happy to answer that for you. And if it's something that's maybe a little more complex, I'll jump in and make sure that I cover it in a video. If it's something that I've already done in this batch, I might be able to come back and make a video of it in the next batch that I do. So don't hesitate to ask questions. Again, I don't have all the answers. This is just the way that I do things, and I don't claim for any of this to be the best way to do it. It's just the way that I do it, and it works for me. But if you know a better way of doing something, you know, I'm happy to hear about it, because I'm still learning too. But if you want to shoot me an email, you can probably shoot me an email through YouTube, or you can send me an email directly to Chris24Griff with 1 F at gmail.com, and I can get back to you there too. If you're interested in orders, the best way to get a hold of me is through the Bushcraft USA forum. That's where I primarily market at the moment. My website's not quite up and running yet; it's still being worked on. But soon enough, I'll be able to link the YouTube videos to my website, and that'll be cool. There'll be lots of really nice pictures there, big pictures, lots of details. So thanks for joining me for episode 3, and episode 4. We'll get to working on our handle materials. And a lot of times I like to bring handle materials and start working on them while I'm doing tempering and while I'm waiting for stuff. But I kind of saved it for this batch to do this video series, because that's kind of a separate thing. If you just want to make blanks and sell blanks, you know, this is one of the last episodes, and then you'll be sharpening. But the next episode that I do will cover sharpening the blanks that we're finishing right now, and then it'll get into I'll probably go into you know, affixing your handles and your liners, and then grinding out the shape of your handles, and then actually applying them to the knife. And then the final episode, as far as the knife making goes, will end up probably being shaping and finishing the handles and whatnot. We might go over a little bit of stropping for folks that may not know what stropping is all about. And I'll also do some leatherwork stuff. And again, I am not an authority on leatherwork. I'm even newer to leatherwork than I am to knife work, and I've only been doing knives since August of 2014. So I'm still pretty new to the game, but I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying learning. I've learned a lot. So again, just let me know if you have any questions or suggestions, and we'll see you in the next episode.